Hi friends, I'm Flutter. I thought it might be good to give this presentation to you in case you're interested in hearing how I design and do development of my VR story game. So really this is a lot about how I went from being a designer and an artist to a coder and how I'm crafting VR experiences, specifically VR storytelling experiences. So narrative is a very strong piece. And a little bit about my background is that I was a graphic designer as my day job for many, many years. And on the side, I would work on art projects, everything from visual art, puppetry, video, and music, which was a big one for me. And then in the spring of 2021, I decided to upskill in XR design. Currently, I'm on contract as a lead VR designer for an edtech startup. By embracing coding in C#, I've evolved into what I call a designer first VR dev. So in this talk, I'll explain my design process and how I've been independently developing my VR story game called Shadowmend. And so if this is something you're interested in doing, I hope this presentation encourages you. And I do want to mention that I could do many videos on the aspects that I'm touching on in this presentation. So this is very much an intro to everything I do and very high level. All right, so storytelling in VR. How is storytelling in virtual reality different from other mediums? Well, watching a film is something I love, and it is passive. Regardless of how engaged you are or drawn in you are, it's still a passive experience. A video game now provides the ability for you to make decisions and interact with the world. However, in both of these cases, this is experienced on a flat screen. And if you're at this channel and you're viewing this right now, I'm sure you're very interested in VR, right? And so what's the difference there? It's as if you are plopped right into that 3D world. It's very immersive, interactive, and there's a strong sense of presence because these digital objects are in a 3D space, and it looks like you could just reach out and grab the object as if it was in your real life. So I just think that is so exciting, and I often ask this question: what possibilities are available when you can be dropped into a film? Or even think of it this way: dropped into a theater performance and you're right there amongst the action and you're in the world. So this is what I'm so excited about and why I'm exploring this and why VR narrative is so important to me, specifically in VR. And I really do see this as the future of arts and entertainment. It is definitely a new art medium for me. So now this is all great, but how do I do this? And how can you do this? Well, here's some of my VR design and dev process. I went to college a long time ago for film production and studio art. So my approach to VR is a lot like my other art projects, except for player agency being the main difference. And with VR, the three-dimensional digital space is going to be really important. And that's a huge difference and something to be aware of. Let's take a look at my messy Miro board that I'm sharing with you. I feel very vulnerable sharing my messy board with you, but it's important because I want you to see how I work. Now, I've been working on this by myself, so I'd be more organized if I was sharing this with someone, but there's different areas where I'm working on character concepts, or I'm looking for lighting inspiration, or I have sketches of how the player is going to move. So like some game flow sketches, move through the story, and some even storyboarding sketches. So I just wanted you to see this because concepting and pre-production are done on paper for me, as well as using Miro. And I use this tool throughout the production process because there's just so much that goes into game development, and Miro really helps me keep track. And I even have checklists on there that I can, you know, click a box and check off things that I need to get done. And this really offers flexibility for me as I shift between so many of these different tasks. So I like having the ability to zoom right into a section and zoom out so I can see the big picture of my game, but then I can also really dial into some of the details as well. And when I need to shift a lot between different tasks, this is really flexible, this product. And something I created, if you watch my video about this, I talk in more detail about this VR design document that I created that's free to download from this link. And it has all the different areas that you would need for creating a application in VR so that nothing gets missed and everything is just very, like, you could see everything very clearly when you look at this document. So definitely check that out to stay organized with your project. So my design and dev process is similar to other people that you may have heard talk about this same thing. I concept first, and that's again with finding inspiration images and references, and I sketch things. I also sketch in the design process. And that's when I think about the emotional and sensory experience that the player is going to have, and I really make the plan. How people are going to interact with objects and characters. And I love setting the vibe in the environment. And then I go into the prototyping stage, which is where the mechanics and coding come in, the functionality and features for the game. And then when I'm done with that and feel like I have a walkthrough of the game ready for someone to look at, I show my friends a demo first or a vertical slice. Those are two distinguishable things, but we can talk about that in another video. And then I test with strangers after I test with my friends. And when I get that feedback, I iterate. So that means that I could go back to any of these different stages in the process. It just depends on what feedback I get and how many changes I need to make and where those changes need to happen. And then I complete a new version and then repeat the testing process again, and I just keep iterating until it's done. Now I highlighted this little icon right here. That's me in the 3D space listening to some awesome music or ambience. So what I really like to do is build the environment in 3D, and I just love sitting in there and walking around the environment and thinking about what the player would like to do in that environment. So that really helps me also design. This technique, a lot of people use Shapes XR or Gravity Sketch for the same reason, because to really be in the 3D space is so much different than looking at a flat screen. So it does help to constantly be in the environment you're creating. Also to make sure that the scale is correct, how vast is the space, how narrow is it, you know, are you feeling claustrophobic, is that the point, or do you need more space for the player to breathe and feel like they have more room? It really depends on what you're creating. So I love to just be in there, and I love being in three-dimensional spaces that I create. So it really helps me think about, okay, what's next? And when it came to the club, I was experimenting for Shadowmend, and I would just hang out in the club with the characters dancing and think about, well, what is this story going to present, and how is this going to unfold for the player? And so that's a lot of fun to do that. And you really need to think about, who is this for? That's always in the back of my mind. Who am I making this for? I went onto quanticfoundry.com and I took a short quiz and got my personal gamer profile, my motivation as a gamer anyway. And it was very interesting. I like how immersion is pretty high. So that makes a lot of sense. So you can go there and see what your gamer motivation profile is. However, what I really suggest is not just to make this for yourself, but to also make this for who you think your ideal player is for your game, and really think about what their motivation is and plan around that. So it's really important to think about your player all the time. Now that we have this plan and everything, how do we pull the player through the experience? Okay, so my favorite thing here is from story arcs to game flow, mapping a narrative to game flow. So you can search story arc in your favorite browser and you'll find a lot of illustrated examples of this. A common one is the hero's journey. So the structure of a story informs gameplay design. So map game progression to a story arc. You can also use a flow state progression or an emotional progression chart. What I mean by this is you will determine how players move through emotional and gameplay peaks as they go through your game and that game flow. And now, when you're testing, you really need to observe your players and see their reactions as they move through the game and make sure that they match your intention. And then you can find out if the flow is working or not. So, in this case, I would say that exposition, like the beginning of the story, would be a great time to do onboarding. And then there, as the rising action happens, the player will confront possibly a monster or some kind of obstacle. And once they do that, they gain a new ability or they have a new strength. So, really, every time I'm thinking about the game flow, I think, what happens next? Okay, this happened. Now what happens? Now what happens? And I keep doing that. And I just wanted to show you how I map that to a traditional story arc. Learning to code, a designer's journey. Yes. So, you have this plan and that's awesome. And maybe you even have that game flow sketched out. If you're like me, you may have been sitting in a VR environment, just walking around and thinking about how the player's going to move through there, what interactions you want, what story you want to tell. So you've got all that. Now it's time to execute this idea, right? And so that's where interactivity is needed and where coding comes in. So coding helped me develop functional interactions throughout the story. And here's a couple of examples. On the left, you see the heart interaction, which has specific timing. And when you walk up to any of these characters, you will heal their heart, but it's only temporary because then it breaks again. But if you're fast enough and get all the hearts healed at the same time, fireworks will happen. But remember, you cannot heal all their hearts. So that's the challenge. And I also used code to keep my character dialogue system organized because I didn't want to confuse the player by having a lot of different characters have dialogue show up. Also, that'd be really distracting in VR. If you see it says here, I'll never figure it out, and that's okay. So I have some written text, and to have written text all over the environment would be really breaking immersion. So I only have it on one character at a time, and I really needed to code that specifically so that it wouldn't trigger any of the other characters. So I would say start simple with what you know and then build from there. I'm familiar with XR Interaction Toolkit, so I usually start there. And I like to watch a lot of tutorials and see how I can put my twist on what they're teaching. So look at a lot of what's out there and learn from other people, and then see how you could maybe make that a little different or apply it to what you're working on. And how AI helped me code my game. I also have a video about this. And if you're learning to code, that's great because I feel that once you have the coding knowledge, just foundational knowledge, and you understand the language, let's say it's C#, like for Unity, that's what I use, then you can start using AI. And I've used ChatGPT, Claude AI, and Unity's Muse to assist me in understanding and writing code, but also for a lot of troubleshooting. And I just wanted to show you this screenshot of how I prompt Claude AI. This is from Claude AI about an issue I'm having. I always say I'm making a VR game and what game engine it is, Unity, and what version. And then I always list important packages that I'm using, like the XR Interaction Toolkit, and I always give the versions of those. And that's been really helpful. And then I go from there. As designers and artists, we know how to solve creative problems. So coding is just another way to bring your ideas to life. You don't have to be an expert coder, but you do need to utilize that tool in order to have your game be playable, right? So I came up with this. I was looking for a lot of quotes and I just thought I'll make up my own. And so lead with your creativity and the tools will follow. And what I mean by that is, there's a lot to learn and it can be really overwhelming, believe me. And so be resourceful and work with your current skill set. Start there and then keep learning and keep going. I look at my design plan and what I want to accomplish, and then I see where there's a skill gap for myself, and then I learn what is needed, and then I work within my limitations of my current skill set. And then sometimes if it's too much to learn, I simplify the project because I feel like, yeah, maybe I don't really know enough to do this really complicated feature. So then I scale back and I go, well, what can I do? As long as it tells the story properly and moves the player forward and it's interesting and it's a good experience, it's okay if it's simplified. Sometimes simplifying and working within limitations is even better. So if you want to hear more about my creative process, please hit that subscribe button and give me a like, and you can find me on LinkedIn. And if you want to check out my portfolio, please do at fluttervr.com. And I'm so excited because Shadowmend is having its world premiere at Fivers on October 3rd through the 8th in Toronto, Canada. So I'm excited about that, and Shadowmend should be available to you on SideQuest at the end of the month. Thank you so much, friends. I hope that this presentation was helpful to you as well, and until next time, take care.